What if an entire colony just vanished overnight? Not some small group of settlers, but an entire town full of men, women, and children simply gone without a trace. It sounds like the plot of a horror movie, but it's actually the terrifying reality of one of history's greatest mysteries. Join us today as we dive into the forgotten archives and uncover the truth behind the last days of the lost colony of Roanoke. But be warned, some of these details are so shocking and strange that they've even baffled experts for over 400 years. The year is 1590, after a long and treacherous voyage across the Atlantic. A ship arrives at the uncharted shores of Roanoke Island. The crew disembarked and began exploring the unfamiliar landscape, searching for signs of life. As they venture deeper into the island's interior, their excitement begins to build. They have come in search of a new world, a world brimming with opportunity and riches beyond their wildest dreams. But as the crew approaches the edge of the forest, their faces fall. Before them lies a scene of utter devastation. The settlement they had come to find is nowhere to be seen. In its place, only an abandoned fort and a handful of decaying buildings stand as silent witnesses to a tragedy that has puzzled historians for centuries. With no sign of the colonists anywhere, the crew is faced with a haunting question. What happened here? The year before, in 1589, the fortunes of Sir Francis Drake had taken a dramatic turn. After a successful raid on the Spanish, he had returned to England laden with riches, making him one of the wealthiest men in the kingdom. But his fortune was short-lived. Spain, a formidable naval power, had caught wind of his exploits and retaliated with a fierce attack. Drake's ships were damaged, and his crew was depleted. Seeking refuge, he turned to the familiar shores of Roanoke Island, where he knew he could find sanctuary. Here, amidst the lush forests and sandy beaches, he had established the first English settlement in North America. At least that was the plan. In reality, the first attempt at colonization had been a dismal failure. Disease and starvation had taken a heavy toll on the settlers, and those who had survived had been forced to abandon the settlement and return to England in disgrace. Undeterred, Raleigh, along with several other English nobles, known as the Elder Brethren of the Company of Virginia, secured the support of Queen Elizabeth I and set about planning a second attempt at colonization. This time, however, Raleigh would not be leading the expedition. Instead, he chose John White, an experienced explorer and cartographer, to serve as governor of the new colony. As the supplies were gathered and the ships were prepared, excitement began to build among the colonists. Many were young men seeking their fortune, while others were families looking for a fresh start in a new land. Among them was Eleanor Dare, a young woman who would soon become a key figure in the colony's history. She had come with her husband and sister, and when their child was born, they named her Virginia in honor of the colony they called home. On July 1587, the three ships carrying the colonists and their supplies arrived off the coast of Roanoke Island. As the settlers began to unload, a sense of camaraderie quickly formed. They had all come together for a common purpose, to establish a new life in the new world. White organized the construction of Fort Raleigh, a sturdy wooden fort that would serve as the center of the colony. Meanwhile, the other settlers set about building their homes and preparing for the challenges ahead. But their optimism was soon put to the test. The settlers quickly realized that life in the new world was not as easy as they had imagined. Food was scarce, supplies were dwindling, and the harsh terrain offered little respite from the elements. To make matters worse, the Native Americans, who had initially been friendly, soon became hostile. Attacks were frequent and deadly, and the settlers were forced to live in constant fear for their lives. Despite these challenges, the colony endured. The settlers fought back against the Native Americans, and they began to learn the ways of the forest, how to hunt and fish and grow crops in the unfamiliar soil. But their survival came at a cost. The colony was deep in debt, and the settlers were desperate for help. In 1588, White decided to take a single ship back to England to plead for more supplies and financial aid. He left the colony in the hands of his friend, Governor John Dare, and set sail for home. But within weeks, his ship was captured by a Spanish warship, and he was thrown into a dungeon. When he finally returned to Roanoke, he found the colony in ruins. Governor Dare had perished, along with most of the colonists. The settlement was deserted, the houses abandoned, and the fields overgrown. With no one to govern the colony, and with supplies running low, the remaining settlers had fled, leaving behind everything they had worked for. And that's when things get really weird. When White reported this disaster to the English authorities, they refused to believe him. Surely, they said, the colonists hadn't all just vanished into thin air. There had to be some logical explanation for their disappearance. So a search party was assembled and sent to Roanoke to find out what had happened. They combed through the deserted settlement, searching for clues, but they found none. The houses were empty, the chests untouched. It was as if the colonists had simply packed up and left. But why and where could they have gone? As the searchers explored further, they stumbled upon a series of strange and disturbing discoveries. First, they found the bones of an infant, lying in the sand as if deliberately placed there. Then they discovered a series of crude drawings on the walls of one of the houses, depicting scenes of violence and despair. Finally, they came across a single word carved into the trunk of a tree, Croton. These cryptic clues offered tantalizing hints at the fate of the lost colony, but they also raised more questions than they answered. What had happened to the colonists? Had they been killed and their bodies left to the scavengers? Or had they fled to Croton? Whatever that meant. The searchers were baffled and ultimately had to abandon their mission. Years passed and the mystery of the lost colony deepened. Historians and explorers alike were drawn to the enigmatic tale, each coming up with their own theories as to what could have happened. Some believed that the colonists had been wiped out by disease or starvation. Others claimed they had been massacred by the Native Americans. Still, others whispered that the colony had simply vanished into thin air, leaving behind nothing but a mystery that has endured for centuries. Today, the story of the lost colony of Roanoke continues to captivate and intrigue. For centuries, historians have analyzed every piece of evidence, every clue, and every theory, trying to piece together what really happened on that fateful day in 1590. But despite their best efforts, the mystery remains unsolved. There are many theories as to what happened to the colonists, but no one knows for sure. Some believe that the colonists were absorbed into the local Native American tribes, while others believe they were victims of disease or famine. Still, others believe that they simply abandoned the settlement and moved elsewhere. One of the most popular theories is that the colonists were killed and eaten by the Native Americans. This theory is supported by the fact that the bones of an infant were found at the site, and the drawings on the walls depicted scenes of violence and despair. However, there is no concrete evidence to support this theory, and it is likely that the colonists were able to flee the island, perhaps to the nearby Croton Island, which is only 50 miles away. Another popular theory is that the colonists suffered from starvation or disease. This theory is supported by the fact that the English had a history of losing colonies due to disease and famine. However, there is no evidence that this is what happened at Roanoke, and it is more likely that the colonists were able to sustain themselves on the island, as they had been doing for several years before their disappearance. Perhaps the most intriguing theory is that the colonists simply vanished into thin air, leaving behind nothing but a mystery that has endured for centuries. This theory is supported by the fact that the settlement showed no signs of a struggle and the colonists' belongings were left behind. If this is true, then what happened to the colonists? Did they travel to another location, or did they simply disappear? The truth is, we may never know what happened to the lost colony of Roanoke. The mystery of their disappearance has captivated historians for centuries, and it will continue to do so for many years to come. But what do you think happened to the lost colony of Roanoke? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this one. Thanks for watching.